Zoom recording. Sorry about that. A little rusty in this, I guess. New share. Okay, so here's the July 15th minutes. Let me zoom in a little bit so people can actually read it. So on July 15th, we had a committee meeting, and that's where we discussed the need for reviewing the financial needs of the district. Of new business, we had the 2021 budget presented and reviewed and recommended for the board. And then we reviewed the engineering report we got on the AST fuel system from CS companies. And in general, I think everybody was kind of shocked about the price tag on that and overhead that they added. They just blankly added 40% in overhead to the prices they came up with. So the general consensus was we need to take a different route because there's no way that that price could justify the replacement of the fuel system. So we have some updates on that today. But anyway, that's the minutes from July 15th. I don't know if there's any changes or if we can approve these minutes.
I don't have any comments.
I guess this was even before Dominic's time, so I guess I'll
Right. Yeah.
move that we approve the minutes.
Aye.
Hi. Dominic, I know you.
Aye.
It's kind of, you weren't present, so I don't know. So, but anyway, we'll post the minutes as listed here. With that, let me go back to the agenda. All right, so this is the time for public comments. We have quite a few, and again, board members are not supposed to speak up in this meeting, but any other public comments?
This is Phil.
Yeah.
The other day I showed you a sample of a asphalt product that somebody's working with. They're going to get me a bid.
Okay.
I don't know if that's what we want to go with. This was just one company and one product. It's about a 1/4 inch thick, and it has no particle above 1/8 of an inch. So 1/8 of an inch, a BB is larger than 1/8 of an inch. So I'm going to drop that off one of these days very soon to Dominic. Let the board members look at it and decide if we wanted to go that way, which I don't know if I would recommend. It's called a type 1 surface. And I don't know if I would recommend going that way. I still am myself personally leaning more towards a seal coat rather than a slurry surface. So, but I just wanted to let the board know that I'm trying to make some effort to give them some choices and some different vendors.
That sounds good. Appreciate that, Phil.
Yes. This is for Phil for the streets.
For the streets.
Yeah.
And the company that I'm dealing with is both Caltrans approved and FAA approved. So whatever that means, which could or could not be anything. It's not as inexpensive as a seal coat. It's more expensive, but they guarantee it for probably about 10 years.
Do you know what the price per square foot it is?
They've measured a little under 1 million square feet of road here, and I think it's going to, they're taunting around 300,000. So that's a lot of money. But if you divide that into 3 seal coats, then maybe it isn't so much.
Yeah.
That's what I need to get more information so I can present it and let the board and others.
That'd be great.
But
It would be nice too if they have a place where we can go look what this slurry surface looks like, I guess, if they have any.
yeah, they'll be able to supply a couple of different people, and it would be nice to talk to them a year after the surface was installed or 5 years after the surface was installed.
Yeah, exactly.
But I have that one sample I showed you there in the office, and I'll just give that to you, and that gives you an idea of what we're looking at.
Yep. I appreciate that, Phil. Thank you.
Sure.
And that gives us another data point.
Yeah, and Phil,
Oh,
yeah, say for reference, some reports I ran into when we were doing the Measure P stuff. There was a report on the pavement. The area on the residential street side is 876,800 square feet. It's under 1 million.
Yeah, that's what, and they figured it around 900,000.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Yeah, it's nickels and dimes difference.
Yeah.
okay. Look forward to that because we need some updated data. I think a lot of the street numbers we have are fairly old. So.
Well, one of the things, and that's in today's oil dollars, which are pretty high.
Right.
So one of the things we would have to do is kind of try and time the work to a lower oil cost time. And that's hard to do.
Yeah, right.
Now oil costs are astronomical. And I think that if we could get that down 20 or 30%, that may be a whole lot more doable.
Sounds good. Thank you. Any other public comments? Or do you have the name of the company, or do you want to wait for them?
I have their card, and
Okay.
I'll bring all that into the office.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Hopefully I can get a written, what I'm asking for is a preliminary bid, basically a budget bid, because we don't want to take and get a bid from someone when there's really not a bidding process going on and it could affect being competitive.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Sure.
Any other comments? Okay, let's move on to old business. I think I always said, but committee member update. So would like to thank Burl and Kevin for their participation over the last couple of years, and welcome Terry and Dominique as new committee members. So welcome Terry, welcome Dominique. So, and to mention, Terry has really stepped up already, and actually he's going to be the primary presenter today when we get to the new business. Monthly update. So last committee meeting, Jim Bray kind of took on to have a monthly update to district residents. We don't think we have the format yet, and I know Diane should be in the meeting now and not allowed to speak, but she has been working on some presentations that look very, very useful about how to present and communicate the financial data for the district. So without Jim here, I think we will table this until the next committee meeting. And with that, we'll move on to new business. So Terry, this is your time. So we have been reviewing some data, and Terry has defined what he calls operational tiers, and you'll present what he means by that. And he has developed a very good financial model, which shows what is the impact going to be on different kinds of fees or income from various sources. So with that, Terry, maybe I should let you start sharing your presentation here. I'll stop.
Okay. First to start with the chart presentation. I'll go to, everybody see this?
Yes.
So this is just, there's two parts to kind of what I want to present and review for discussion. One is just a PowerPoint presentation. It's kind of an overview. And then show you the Excel financial model itself, where the numbers come from. The model was originally developed for when we were doing the Measure P activities, and I've made a bunch of changes to it to make it more applicable to what we're talking to here now. But let me run through the first part of this. So what I'd like to do here is kind of review with the committee here to review and validate the proposed financial status tiers as you Canute mentioned, financial performance indicators, then take a look at the financial inputs into the model, and then look at the analysis from various model scenarios. And then out of that, I think will fall out the recommendations for going forward to the board, and then when we have the public finance status meeting. We've been talking about this public meeting for quite a while, and the purpose of that is to present to the public where we are financially, the forecast, and what also the kind of needs are and what we need to achieve those needs. This is all aimed toward doing that. So first of all, on the financial tiers, so what I'm proposing that we adopt. What I was looking for is a simple way to say where the airport finances currently are, and generally what the forecast would be for about the next 12 months. That's somewhat arbitrary. So for example, we say we're X, that tells people we're in a certain status. It gives them an idea where we are. And then particularly when we go to raise money or looking at additional funds, where does that funds going to be used for? So starting off here, and I apologize, can't see my whole screen for some reason here. Tier 0, and this is just for the airport. There's a separate one for the streets. Tier 0 is the very bad situation where we have insufficient funds to sustain daily operations, default avoided or deferred by major service and or operations reductions and or eliminations. For example, eliminate the manager. If fuel system repairs are needed, we basically shut down the fuel system. Eliminate obstruction mitigation, on and on. This is a very bad thing. Without additional funds, the airport will close. Tier 1 says we have sufficient funds to keep the airport operating, which means daily operations, minimal obstruction mitigation, minor repairs on equipment, no infrastructure. Well, not minor repairs only, minimal equipment maintenance. They're not funded for our reserves to maintain pavement, replacing failing infrastructure, or do major repairs. They are not funded. Tier 2 says you take tier 1, then you go fund the reserves needed to maintain our infrastructure. This is where we get into long-term sustainability of the airport. This allows us, this says we're building reserve for the matching grants for not only the airport layout plan, which is key to everything here, but also building up to 10% that we need for major, for pavement maintenance, repairs, and perhaps a replacement of critical infrastructure. The main thing here is this is set up to what this funding here says we can maintain existing infrastructure for long-term sustainability. Tier 3 would be a really great position to be in, because now you exceed what you need for tier 2, plus we build up reserves for things like purchasing property and building matching grant money for major improvements. So I'm defining here the difference between existing infrastructure and improvements, or reserved for minor improvements or major contingencies. Tier 3 would be a great position to be in. And the only thing I can think of for all my experience have been at the airport, when we talk about major improvements to the airport, because of our limited sizes, all we can do is widen the runway. Can't lengthen it, but we could widen the runway. But that's under tier 3. Oops, let me get down. Next chart. Residential street, same at least tiers, but tier 0 says we don't have any funds to do any significant maintenance. No funds beyond property tax from the county added to street maintenance accounts. Rate of street account growth is not sufficient to fund maintenance for maximum street life without bonds or loans. Street pavement will eventually fail. That you can read in definition. That's where we currently are today for streets. Then it says tier 1, you're starting to grow off sufficient funds to do the near-term repairs, which includes the crack sealing and slurry seals. Again, each of these have a wide variety of costs associated with them, but it says we're on the way to build funds for those. But we'd have insufficient funds to develop resurfacing without bonds or loans. Handling the streets is a lot different than the airport. The streets are relatively simple. The numbers are big, and the street stuff is spread out over a long period of time. But it is a very different way to handle them than the airport. And of course, you get to tier 2 says we got funds for the everything else plus the resurfacing. Resurfacing is not for a long time. And tier 3 says, boy, we're doing great. Maybe we've got any money for potential improvements, including drainage issues. So let's see. The financial performance indicators, and this will make more sense once you see the inputs is, but what I was looking for was a quick look at assessment to see how we're doing for airport operations and maintenance, street maintenance, and the assessment district. Assessment district has done a really excellent job organizing after the last several years, straightening out some issues we had with it, but it kind of is a standalone. Again, as a reminder, the assessment district is to handle and to pay off the bond loan that was taken up by the district to pay for the street resurfacing, which matures in 2029. What I was looking for for a financial performance assessment is looking at the end of a reporting period, for example, the end of a fiscal year, which is typically the balance sheet, and look at how much cash we have, accounts receivable, what we have and what we currently have, we call a restricted maintenance fund. If we adopt these tiers, it'll look at what we have in the 2-tier reserve, what we'd have in a tier 3 reserve if we have that, and of course the street accounts, and of course minus any current liabilities. I think this will make a little more sense here. How would we use those reserves? We would set up separate reserve accounts. This is airport only here for the fuel tank replacement and cleanup, get a priority. Perhaps things like the airport, a separate account for the airport layout plan, or lump all the other reserve account to one, at least initially start. The main point is we would set up a tier 2 account for new funds coming in for a particular increase in special, special tax, and the money would go into there and be reported on as part of the CPAD board meetings, part of the financials, giving the visibility to what's accumulated in there. And of course, when decisions are made then to have expenditures, such as for the airport layout plan or the other, hopefully we can pay for a lot of things with the 10% grant, but they have that visibility to where the money's going. Tier 1 money, again, which is handling the day-to-day operations, would be treated separately. Again, the primary objective there is to give the visibility. What I'm trying to avoid is having where we're lumping money all into one account and it doesn't seem to be attract to a particular goal that we're trying to accomplish. Analysis models, and again, this will make more sense once you see the Excel sheet. The models have a 20-year outlook from 2022 to 2041. You see, the reason why it's 20 years is that's about the outlook that for a street resurfacing, which is a major cost. 3 particular examples here. The analysis model, I'm just calling version 1, takes a look at constant year dollars. Takes a look at tier 2, airport tier 2 expenses and schedule, and to show that. And by the way, many of these projects and pavement plans and so forth came from what we did for the Measure P. And takes a look at the streets tier 1 expenses and schedule. Then using the model tool, did what's called a goal seek, determine what special tax increases are needed to close on those budgets. Model 2 takes a look at the again the airport tier 2 expenses and schedule. I attempted to put adjustments for inflation and operations costs in there, as well as adjustments for increasing fuel income as we look over time. Because everything else going back to model V1, I've been looking for constant year dollars, because that's particularly nowadays, that's not very real life. At model analysis V2, version 2 goes through those adjustments for fuel, for operations costs and fuel income, but no change to the special tax. And you can see where through those models, you can see where we run out of money. As a quick preliminary results to give you a feel, again, it'll make sense once you see things. But looking, and of course, all this is based on the assumptions that go into the model, recognizing that there's a lot of variances with it, and we'll show that. But for the first model, V1, again, constant year dollars, using the airport projects and streets projects. The airport says we have to increase the budget by increase the special tax by $36.34 for a total of $61.34. Again, this is depending on the assumptions that go into this. The streets are another issue. To close on the streets is $70, is almost $71. And when you see the model, what's really driving that is the streets, the slurry seal, which I put out, I believe in 2025, and having 3 or 4 years to develop enough reserves to handle that, about 300, because having the $380,000. So that's what really drives it. So that's not, a really realistic way perhaps to do that, but we do need a slurry seal or some type of slurry seal. By comparison, I attempted on model V2 to add adjustment, and you see that I just picked 4% because that's currently what the national average for inflation right now is. To inflate the operations cost and the fuel income, same special tax as we had calculated in V1, same expenses. And it shows that the district actually runs out of money, runs out of funds. The airport side does in 2028, and we go to tier 0. What does that mean? We've got to get more increases after that. Again, all based on the assumptions of the model. A variation of that model, which I'm calling V21. Again, adjusting for inflation and hangar costs, same special tax. I'm sorry. Then I add on increasing hangar income with that. I just assumed a 4%. This is to give an idea of what the possibilities are. And then it shows that we get a couple of extra years, but the district does run out of funds at the end of 2030. And we go to tier 1 then. Again, what does that mean? We got to raise more money. That's 9 years from now. Then look what happens if we don't increase the special tax at all. We do no infrastructure maintenance. In other words, just as we are now, based on the numbers in the model and the assumptions, we run out of money in 2026. We go to tier 0. Then as it says, well, let's go increase the hangar income. Look and see what the effect of that is. Basically, just assume a 4% increase per year. That gives us another year, but if we don't increase the special tax at all and no other changes except hangar rent going up, we run out of money for the airport 2027. Can I say for the airport because the street funds are being treated separately, and because you're aware of today, the street fund grows by roughly 13,000, 14,000 per year because of what we get from property taxes. And of course, there's a big warning for this is if the fuel system fails under this is our big risk. Revenue sources, this is kind of a subject for the committee to talk about, but increase
kind of
focusing on hangar rents, maybe commercial fees. The streets, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, it breaks up a little bit once in a while. Maybe that's it. Go ahead. I think Terry froze.
So there may be occasional things like this happen. Guys, that currently we don't have a special tax assigned for streets through the property tax. The special tax that shows up on our property taxes for the airport, and those funds go to the airport. That's our current $25 per month. So the only revenue for the street coming in is what we get through the property taxes and through the assessments. Near-term financial options, particularly for the fuel system replacement. The only way one of the options to fund the fuel system is to take out a loan. And we'll be talking also some of the numbers that I put preliminarily for that. I think that's within our really reality to be able to take out a loan, call it a term of 20 years, but the monthly payments required to finance that would have to be through additional revenue. Slurry seal perhaps could do the same thing, a loan rate of TBD years. When I was trying to model this, it's got a little bit more trickier given the other activities for the streets. But again, the payments would be financed through a special special tax for the streets. Yeah, possible recommendations, just really TBD now. This would be the recommendations to the board. Let me save the fuel system now and go to the models. So I'm going to stop sharing. Sharing this and go to the model. Can you see this?
I'm still seeing your PowerPoint
Okay.
presentation.
Okay, I just switched it.
Oh, I
Okay.
see your spreadsheet. Yeah.
Okay. So the first part of this is the financial information that goes in. Now, I'll give you an overview here that goes into the spreadsheets. And Knut, since you saw this last time, I had to ragtag things out of order and stuff, but attempted to show the order that we see things in the profit and loss statements, for example, and the balance sheets. Just that's kind of where we are, and I don't have what we have for Jeff. Is more. So some information I gave you, take that with the kind of grain of proverbial salt, because there's missing information really from that to give more validity to that. But I think it starts to get in the ballpark. So I've taken numbers here, for example, what the incomes are that we currently generate, get right off our profit and loss statements, then set up, try to take a look at a 3-year average of what those are to kind of then pick a number that would be used in the model. For example, fuel income. You read across the line here, it kind of varies a little bit, but it's, it's up there about 100 and, the high 180s, and then gets in in one case, 2019, almost 200,000. So far, by the way, this year, we've taken in almost 86,000 in fuel. But looking at and projecting a number, gut feel, pick 195,000 as a base, for example, that goes into the model. Where then that information gets used isn't this very sometimes hard to scroll through a model. The income information, for example, goes into this table. It shows up here. This is linked back to the other sheet. And this table has the various projects or expenses that we're looking at, including airport operations. There's a lot of columns in here or rows which aren't used because they're a little bit heritage from the Measure P things when we're looking at a wide variety of things. The input into that table where the calculations are done for the various expenses come from here. Example, estimating the, well, let me skip the fuel system right here because that's a different situation as a loan. But for example, the ALP, that was costed out originally at 180,000. However, we only have to come up with 10% of that. So that's a 10% match. I'm including that in the request, so that's a yes, because I can toggle here whether that is in the model or not. We're going to start saving for that in 2022, and we're also going to spend the money in 2022. And so that's 1 year to amortize that. The fuel system, because it's a loan, this is the total of the loan payments. And that comes from a very simple table here, where I'm assuming a principal of 350,000, 20 years at 5%. I'm going to assume then the monthly payments are $2,400 a month. The principal, the total payments over the life of that, of course, is then 576. So on the model, the fuel system shows up in this row. This is the amount we're trying to pay here. We spread that over 20 years. And every year we're spending $28,800 to pay off, to service that loan. For things, for example, like a slurry seal in the taxiway and runway, we start saving for that in 2023. We save for that for 5 years. And here the plan has where we're going to go spend that money, all gets spent. Similar type setups then as we look for resurfacing, which go out into the future quite a ways. But the same idea is we set a period where we're going to start setting reserve aside for these particular projects. And then we spend them. So this comes from this table. The numbers and costs for these programs are in constant year dollars. That's the other fallacy of this, is while I've inflated the operations costs, I've not made the model where you can inflate the project costs. These are numbers that came out of our work for Measure 2. I through time and stuff and all the changes, I don't have a lot of confidence in them, but at the time we take it, I did what research I did on pavements and stuff, this seemed to be the recommended time, but this requires a validation by very smart people to figure out if this is correct. But I think it's a good place to start from. So again, these numbers here are the best guesses, and these numbers came from a table of inflation when work at the airport was originally done years ago. Then it was inflated to carry it into $2020. Streets are similar. I put in the cost, back then an estimated cost of resurface. Fortunately, this is something, if we take good care of the streets, we could really push this out. Put an estimated cost for the slurry seals based on the data we had then. Actually, it's $368,000. Crack seals, we know I think it was 2018, that was done for nearly $100,000. So we put those costs in here. And the yes just means they're included for purposes of the model. So for the airport, I know this is a bit hard to see. If you look at, the table here shows when we expend money and when we take money in. What's highlighted is when we go spend money. There's, excuse me. So this goes through and calculates what income in this case, what we currently are getting. I'm not going to explain every row on here, but finally I get to a line that says total income minus expenses. The red means we're in the hole for this, and that's because this is driven by doing the ALP plan first. We still have to discuss whether we're going to spend money on the ALP plan. Or are we going to need to spend money up front to get the fuel system going? I think we need the fuel system going, but I think it's going to result in about the same answer. The ALP would just be deferred to be later. We spend some money up front to get the fuel system going. But calculation wise, I'm taking a look at the total income minus expenses. You can see where it's red here, and then it goes to zero. So we're spending just as much as we're taking in. And then we get slightly positive through the remainder of the plan by order of $24 here. This was a show, this table tries to show how much we start the year with and end the year with. It's simplistic because it says start the year with the money, and then all the income comes in. We start the year on January 1st with the money, and then on January 2nd we get all this huge amount of income for the entire year, and then we spend it, and then we end up with an end of the year amount, which is what we carry to the next year. So it's just this brute force kind of Excel stuff to show where the budgets and accounts would end up at. The goal seeking here and how I get to the $36.34 in this case to close all these budgets is I'm using this line for total income minus expenses. I look at during that row for the 20 years. Excuse me. What is my minimum? Function looks for the minimum amount. And I want to set such that we never go negative, except for this first year. So I'm excluding 2022. And I can show you how that works because it's kind of cool. But I go to, let's see, let me make sure I got the right thing here. But I want the difference between, what happens is I don't want it to get any lower than zero. So I say, here's my minimum. This is my goal, but my goal is not to go below zero. So I'm just looking at this line here. So using the goal seek, I want that value to be 0, and you can see the model already has calculated it. But I do that by changing this value here. And so when I have that go, of course, it's already calculated, but the way to close, and this ends up with exactly 0, is $36.40. Now we wouldn't, we would do say 37, and you can see the effect of 37 here. So instead of 0, it shows 1,000. But anyways, the main point is that's how the goal seek works. Streets are a little bit different in the way it calculated. Oh, by the way, so this, going back to the airport just briefly, using that method to find the payment. So in 2041, and recognize, who knows, that's so far away, anything happened, but at least from the model purposes, this says that at the end of 2041, we have $160,000 in our accounts for the airport. We have a reserve account that has about $36,474 in it at the end of 2041. We get rid of a lot of red here. You see, we occasionally, some of the accounts dip below 0 as we spend money, but we always have money in the accounts. So we're never, the district is never out of money. For the streets, this is the schedule and plan. Here's a slurry seal, which drives these numbers. 3 years to accumulate $368,000. Again, everything on this particular version here is constant year dollars. It is constant year dollars. I try to flatten the expenditures to not have the costs per month be too high. But here it is, and so I assume, for example, the street resurfacing accumulation starts on 2029. We're going to spend it in 2041. The equivalent monthly amount to do that is almost $73. It's just kind of interesting. For the slurry seal, it's almost $81. For the slurry seal 2, what you're planning in 2033, again, that's about 10 years later. Maybe it's not. We get something good on there, it can be extended further. But right now, assuming it's 10 years later, then I've got crack seal kind of in between, probably could do a little adjustment here. But you can see how I tried to time things out so we didn't accumulate a lot of budget needs in a particular year. So again, there's a lot of variables to it. Currently, right now, I'm assuming that our property tax for the streets 14.7, because that's what we've done recently. So that's our income. When I go through and do a goal seek, but this time I'm not looking for the difference between income minus expenses to try to reduce the effect of the slurry seal. So I just said at the end of 2024, after we finish this $1 million resurface, to 0. We'll worry about 2042 later. So I'm doing the goal seek based on just ending up with 0 reserves. And that's where this calculation comes out that says in order to close all this, you need almost $71. Any questions so far? Well, what I'm trying to convey here is how the numbers get generated and also get a feel for some of the variables in this. Model 2 then adds the inflation. And this is all I've done here is I'm just assuming a 4% to increase the operations costs. I'm assuming that our fuel income would also go up by 4%, just in line with inflation. And for purposes here, just said, okay, the hangar will be 4%. We'll tie that with inflation. Whether it's realistic or not, that's part of our, for the finance committee to take an evaluation of. But the main thing I'm trying to do is says, what's the effect of real number inflation things? Because we're in a situation where when we do the special tax increases to the measures, they're fixed. We know that our current special tax we're paying was set in 1995 and it hasn't changed for 26 years. But now if we at least try to put measure inflation, again, recognizing I've not inflated the cost of the slurry seals and the projects and so forth, this is just another step in the modeling. If you maintain that 3624, for example, which closed when constant year dollars, of course you put inflation in, and of course you're gonna spend money faster. So when I look at the end of the year cash balance accounts, you can see we start out the 140,000. We start out with our current about 180,000. and we're dropping it down. And finally in 2027, actually 2028, we go negative. So that says you're continuing to expend the funds to do the infrastructure maintenance. So what I was trying to do in here is get a general feel of how long can we go before we have to go back to the well and get more money. Streets, I didn't even bother to touch because they get. So streets, yeah, the streets has no change here. It's the same information. Let's see, you think the same? Yeah, I think we go back to here. I just want to point out the money where we get, okay, for the airport. Let me go back to here. Okay, so for the airport, assuming we don't do anything, we're just trying to do operations. And we have no increase, today's status, in other words, here's what the financial projection looks like. We run out of money in 2021. Again, a lot of variables that go into that, but obviously with inflation at a fixed special tax rate with no increase, we're going to run out of money someday, in addition to just a failing infrastructure. Any questions?
Thank you, Terry.
So you just cover one more thing here, just going back to the financial models. These were the numbers that went into this. This part, Canoes, I started to talk to you about, requires our analysis on this. Where, as far as financial health, you can look at where we were with the balance sheets at the end of the fiscal years.
Mhm.
So what I rolled it up here and says, what's the airport? I'm not sure if this is the right financial term, but equity, cash minus liabilities. So this is 2018 in this column. So we had almost 191,000. The end of 2019, we had about 185,000. These numbers take out what we have for the streets. For the streets, today, at this moment, as of October 31st, we have nearly 49,000 in the street budget because it keeps going up by about 13, 14,000 a year. But in 2018, almost 7,000. Last year, 22,000. And of course, it jumps up now. So the total district, you can see the numbers here. What we've had some big increases. We got helped out by COVID. And that shows up. That shows up in our profit loss statements. So we've accumulated so far almost $35,000 from the various grant monies. And this is all what's related, well, except for the contribution for property owners. These were the donations that particularly we've picked up over this year. But about $35,000 that we're not going to see again. At least we hope not, for the sake of everybody. And we picked up an additional 30,000 just this year. So when you take those out, it reduces our the income that we get, which is more realistic, is what we're going to see in the out years.
I have
As
a
you know-
question on the grant money, but we can review the specifics, but
Yeah, and
it is, okay, never mind. It is fiscal year 2020. We don't have 21 in there. So.
I don't have 21 because the closest I have to 21 is where we are today as of October 31st.
Yeah.
And there's this thing, continuing, we're not sure how to handle inventory charge for the fuel, which can get pretty sizable. I guess that's an accounting requirement, but I'm not sure exactly how it really plays in. So what I tend to do then roll up for the models are these numbers here to where we start from. And this, I think, to take particularly for the balance sheet side, and how we're doing financial performance wise, we need the physical 2020 numbers. So this does show, I point out that our expenditures, when you look at the profit and loss statements, our expenditures, our total expenses for these years, for last year was 262,000. almost $263,000 a year before 2019. Excuse me, was about 336,000. A lot of things changed year to year, and you can elaborate. In terms of what we spend on construction mitigation and repairs. We were seeing some fuel system repairs that bump things up, particularly in 2020. We had a lot of construction costs, and in 2019 and 2020, one of the effects there is we didn't pay the full manager's salary for the whole year. We got a break from that, so this cost a little bit down. That was part of my rationale for picking $340,000 as the expense. However, that $340,000 begins to not equal the income from the airport after you take away the property taxes, half of about $20,000. If that's real or not, again, this doesn't take into account CARES money. That's what take a look at. But Brad, that's what I was talking about earlier. When I look at the numbers, it seems to be that gap there.
Yeah, unfortunately, the fuel sales and cost is such a huge percentage of our budget that it really skews it if there's just a minor change and when we get fuel deliveries. And that's what the inventory change was supposed to handle. But maybe for the modeling, we should just generally look at how many gallons we sell a year and what the margin on that is, instead of, because I think that more represents what our actual income is, because the fluctuations in fuel price and stuff is just too dominating in our budget, right?
It's heavily influenced by this, and of course, this is only 3 years worth of data,
right?
And and you can have drastic changes as a given year. But really, what for the modeling purposes,
a load of fuel, it's about 10% of our budget, right? So
that's right, yeah. But for the modeling, is trying to figure out what number do I use for expenses. So that's the process of how we come up with the numbers and trying to determine what we need. Last thing I show you is I just did these are all just copying the models, but I tried to show under the proposal that Phil made to the board of the $25 increase and splitting it between airport and streets. So I took the model that does not have any projects in it for the airport, and you can't do anything with the streets, but this is the way it comes out. For the airport, if we allocate $12.50 of that, and this assumes we start seeing that money in 2023, just like the other models, well, we end up at the end of the year based on those assumptions. We change the expenditures. I mean, there's so many variables in this, but all this can do is give a good, at least a reasonable understanding of what could happen. But the $12.50 then just gets us out. I think it buys us 2 years. It gets us out to 2030 before we run out of money. At the same time, we've made no improvement, no changes or repairs to infrastructure. For streets, where we have to pick up 100% of the cost for almost 900,000 square feet of payment, $12.50 better than nothing, but it's a drop in the bucket. These go red because it's assuming this model just happens to assume that you're trying to do the street stuff, which of course you can't do. You can see how the numbers just grow, the deficits grow just continuously, even though you're getting the property tax. So the split of how we've handled any special fee increase, subject for the finance committee to make a recommendation to the board.
Yep. Well, thank you so much, Terry. I would like to ask if there's anybody that have any questions for Terry on his modeling.
Terry, this is Phil.
Mm-hmm.
Looks like you put a lot of effort into this, and I want to thank you for all the effort you did put into it.
Thank you. Thanks, Phil.
The only thing I'd like to make everyone or remind everyone of is for the last 15 years or so, they've been trying to raise these fees. And I think there's been at least 5 or 6 proposals put out there, and all of them have failed. I think if we go for a big proposal, we are going to fail again. And I've talked to quite a few people here, and the reason I came up with 100% increase on the fees was people were willing to pay it. And if we take and go for an exorbitant amount, I think it'll fail again, and we're still going to be in the soup. I've looked at my logbook. I flew 26 times last year in the last 12 months. And under the current fee structure, I'm paying about $12 for a airport fee or every time I go flying. If we went double that, then I'm paying $25 for every time I go flying. So if you use that as a landing fee, that would be pretty exorbitant. I don't know any place around here that would ever charge that much. I think that if we take and have all these plans, which I can understand, we're going to put ourselves out of business, because if we go to, let's say, $100 a month, $1,200 a year, I think that comes up to over $50 every time I go fly. And that would make me think, well, why don't I just go rent a hangar somewhere and not have the cost of a house invested here for the opportunity just to fly every couple of weeks. So I may be on the negative side, and excuse me that I am, but I think that with over 50% of the people here retired and on fixed income, and you start multiplying their fee by 400%, you're bound to fail. Now, I may be wrong. I'll be the first one to admit it. But I think with what you're proposing, I think is not going to work.
Well, no, I'm not,
Yeah.
what I'm doing here is not proposing numbers and just giving the basis for developing it.
Right. And one other thing that I mean, the airport is operated. Now, I'm not saying it's operated well, and I'm not saying it's where it needs to be or where it ever should be. But we have been, for the last 20 years, had about the same $300 fee, and we haven't closed yet. So by doubling that, I can see it doing nothing but improving our chances of keeping the airport viable. By
We're
quadrupling,
only proposing a 50% improvement for the airport, right? $12.50.
it's more than it's getting now, and we're doing 100% on the streets because we're getting nothing on the streets right now.
Right.
So it is, and they're two separate entities. And what we're being asked to do is support a county facility or a state-run facility by the people here just granting money over to them. I don't know how that's going to work. I mean, if somebody lives next to a golf course and doesn't play golf, are they going to want to contribute to the golf course and the county golf course? And I would say no. But I'm not the one to, be the expert on that. I know I got a lot of money invested here.
From my perspective, I understand what you're saying, Phil, but the reality is, it takes money to operate this airport, and it takes money also to keep it for long-term going. And for the airport, it's a pavement, and we only have to pick up 10% of that. Still lots of money.
The issue where some of your things that you're looking at for like a airport improvement plan or a airport layout plan.
Right.
We received the money from the FAA once and squandered it.
Well, Phil, I understand that, but
I understand that we don't want to look back, but we have to look back because that's what the FAA is going to do. I don't think that's going to be coming up again real soon. But
we've got a good relationship with the FAA that's developed between Burl and Kevin, and I think what's in the past is behind us, and what we're trying to do here is to smartly manage this.
Sure, and I understand that, but I've dealt with the FAA for an extended period of time, running some other airports, and all I can say is we don't have a good past history. And excuse me for being very blunt. Excuse me. But But I think that,
I say, Phil, when we've met, it's been a couple of years since we met with the FAA. We didn't run into that as a past bad thing.
sure.
And
And
we
I
got a
think
fresh
that,
start.
and I think that that's great, but I think when the management and that is for the field officers, but when the management goes and say who we're going to give the money to and look at past history, we don't have a good one. And I don't think
Well,
I argue with
Phil,
that.
I understand what you're saying, but we're trying to move on and forward here and then trying to have proposals that gives the visibility and so we can properly manage this going forward and getting any new monies.
And
I mean,
I understand that, but
the
I
choice
think
you're-
being realistic is probably something that we should look at.
Because the choice you're presenting is, let's just let the airport run the ground and, a bunch of people trying to move out before our values go to zero. I mean,
Well,
that's the choice we're in. I mean,
the
eventually,
last 30 or 40 years, the airport is in the condition it is now. It hasn't run to zero. We haven't closed. We still have fuel tanks. We still have operations every day. We have night operations. And this is on what we currently have. I'm saying let's double that. I'm not saying, let's do 10%, let's do 20. I'm saying do 100% increase because
and I'm disagreeing with you on that, because what I try to show here, and this is okay, this is for the board and address Phil is, the original, what I'm showing on this chart, I don't know if you can still see it, just if we split the 25, it does some for the airport. It carries us out here. And again, there's inflation built in this, so it tries to be somewhat, realistic.
Sure.
And in the streets, it helps. Yes, it starts getting money in there where we can start taking these care of, some reasonable repairs in the slurry seal.
I think we should present all the models, right? We should, as you say, you can turn off the ALP if you want. If you don't believe we can get that,
Right.
you can turn it off, and then we can see what is the impact of the.
That's
and
right.
I think the board, we should present what is the proposal that Phil makes and what are the options that.
Whoops, this was already known.
Let the board decide. Because I think what we got to recommend to the board too is what is the step forward here? Are we going to have another measure? And then the most likely time frame for that would be November next year, right? Because the deadline for the June election is already coming up in February. And we don't even have 2 regular board meetings where we can review these data and have a reading of a potential measure.
So that is one of the other points I want to bring up. I brought this up probably last June. And if we needed the money that bad, we should have put a proposal together for the November ballot, which we didn't do.
Well, even June was too late for a.
Right. But now it's not too late for the June ballot.
That is true.
We must not need the money very bad because we're not being very aggressive on moving forward.
Well, Phil, I can present the data here and the money. I know your mission, but recognize we're all volunteers. Many days and hours working on this to try to get to the point where we could make some informed decisions and to not go into these things blindly and make mistakes. It takes time, and we do need the money. This is a long and frankly, as you said before, we went through a huge thing on Measure P, and we're taking the lessons learned from that. But I know there's a sense of burnout. That was
Great.
hundreds of hours worth of work that got us nothing, but we learned from it.
Right.
And and when we came out, you look at what happened since last year made that proposal, and it was good. We lost the airport manager, we lost Burl. There was a time to come up and come up to things where we do what we can.
And I compliment you on everything that you've done and the time you've put into it. It's just what I'm trying to say is the increasing the fees has failed multiple times when we seem to keep going up higher for each another proposal. I'm believing we should go down and get something that will pass.
I think we need to move on. I think.
Okay, I agree.
We need to present to the board that we have a number of proposals on the table, and we should present the way the finance committee sees the proposal. We have one from Phil, And Phil did submit a wording for a ballot measure that was not approved by the board, and now it can't make it for the next election unless we have a special one. So that's on the board, but I think what Terry's trying to say too, let's move on to and let's try and review what do we get, and is that really what we want to go after, right? I have heard the argument, some is better than none, I guess, but I
Yeah.
think we should present these models for the board and see what their decision is. And I think Measure P taught us either it was presented incorrectly or it was too high an amount, right? So it could be a combination of the two as well, right? So,
Yeah, and to that point, I feel like, I fundamentally agree with you. And what the model tries to say for what I'm showing here is it says, let's put all the $25 for the airport.
right. And then you can turn off more projects and we can see where we end up.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
and if I would like to one comment on Phil. I think I live here not because of the fee per takeoff. It's because I have a place where I can keep my airplane. I have an airport that has fuel and maintenance and 24-hour operations. And I agree that we have survived until now, but if you look at the infrastructure state over the last 30 years, I wouldn't say it's the same as it was, because the fuel tanks are at the end of life, right? And we haven't saved up a dime to replace them. So I don't think I completely agree that we've done fine on $25 a month. But sorry, I don't mean to continue the discussion. And again, my property value is probably tied to how well the airport fares and if anybody wants to live here with an airplane.
Well, this is my fourth airport that I've lived on and owned property on.
Mhm.
So I have some background.
Yeah, that's fine. Okay, so Terry, as the committee here, I think I know the board meeting coming up Monday is pretty soon, but I think we need to have some kind of formulation of what the board needs to decide going forward, right? So
Right.
the way I see it is we need to formulate some kind of measure, and we have Phil's proposal with $12.50 a month increase for the airport and $12.50 increase for the streets. And then you have run a couple models and what if analysis, right, that takes into account various projects, right, that we can turn on and off. So I think we need to have that discussion with the board and decide what it is going forward. So I got the new measure calendars from the county, and we have to submit by February if we want to be on the June election. So there's always like a 4 months ahead of the election is when you should expect to submit your final resolution and ballot measure. So I don't know, Terry, what do you think? What's the best thing we can present on Monday for the board?
Well, we could show that, the results are, we have to scrub the other, the input assumptions, but assuming you do that, is showing with the $25, which we believe would pass.
Mhm.
Does it, so assuming $25, should that be split between roads and streets, given the state of the fuel system and other infrastructure stuff, or should all the $25 go toward the airport? And the $25, I think, then allows us to do the fuel system, particularly with other increases. I think that's where it comes out. And then defer stuff on the streets. Or is it better, does it make it more palatable if we show some money going to the streets at the expense of, increasing the risk on the fuel system failure? I think that's one scenario to stay within that $25 because we believe that's got a high probability of passing. Or do we go for some amount? Do we go for, to look for an increase of $30 at 25 to the airport, 5 to the streets, or something like that? Where's the threshold? But believe that we need to bring money in. The lower the amount, the sooner that we're going to have to deal with this again as a board. It may be several years. We don't know, what's going to happen with cost and inflations and stuff, but at least just get to the point where we can particularly get the fuel system going.
Okay, so I think I would recommend that we present the board with what we consider to be the impact of Phil's proposal that I think Phil says he believes can pass, knowing who he talks to. I mean, the one we had last time got 62%, the measure P. So it was just 4% off. So I don't know, what do we need to adjust right to get to the required 2/3 majority there. So.
And, part of the, we talk about this process, having the public meeting, in particular Borough was around, is get also the additional public, comment.
Input on that, yeah, where they would like to see it going. That's,
Yeah.
So I think we need to decide at the board meeting too, when are we going to have that public meeting? We've talked about it for a while, I guess, but I think now we can meet in person, right? We can.
Yeah, I mean, we got that. I think we're getting the information to do.
Yep. Okay, so I don't think we have anything else on this. Do you have anything more, Terry?
I can just show some of the fuel numbers for information for the board, the committee here. I mean,
yeah, why don't you bring up the fuel system numbers? Those are just the initial numbers. I know there's been numbers presented all over the board for that too.
That, and I want to caveat.
Are you sharing it now?
I should be sharing. Do you see the PowerPoint?
Yes.
Okay. Oh, this was on my property values, and something we think about the property values, with the effect of having plans or no plans in place. The fuel system, before I show it, I want to just caveat that the focus has been on the financial stuff, because it lays out what we can or can't do for the fuel system and how we do it. So I've actually spent very little time doing the fuel system. I have prepared some materials to start explaining the risk, and we can talk about that in another finance committee meeting. We did receive, as aware of the consultants, which had the very high numbers in it. I have made calls, and particularly had a very informative call with Mascot Equipment, which provided the recently installed tanks at Lincoln Airport, for the purposes of getting an idea of what their cost, but also to continue to learn about fuel system. And several weeks ago, I spent an hour and a half on the phone with him, learning about fuel systems, and also getting cost. And this is from the numbers I'm about to show you come from his perspective. The good news is it's nowhere near what the consultants were telling us, because they put 40% contingent on everything. It's a government contract. And from this, I was encouraged that this puts us in the realm of be able to finance it through a loan, and we just make the monthly payments. That said, again, simple cost estimates here. And again, it comes from quote from Mascot, and he was able to provide the quote for the type of system that we're looking at, which is a 12,000 gallon tank, which allows us to continue to get fuel in 8,000 gallon increments, which is the cheapest way to get it. Because he had just prepared a quote for what airport? An airport in Colorado, which he just sent out. So he basically put our name on it and sent it to us, but was for the same system. The price of this system, there's a lot of details behind this, and floating suction pickups, the 2 tank wall with the concrete in between that we would need to be able to put the dispensers right next to it. There's a lot to these things, from whether the tank's welded to how there's penetrations in the tanks. But the bottom line is, this was the cost for I'm just calling it the integrated tank system. That's my term. With tax is about $157,000 for a 12,000 gallon tank, 10,400 usable. That's with a dispenser, but does not have a point of sale system. It's a ready to go basic system. Excuse me. For reference, the QT, he went out and got a quote for the QT system. You see that with the tax and everything, it's almost $18,000. He did come back today in an email and said the fuel master position, he's trying to get numbers on that, but he believes that'll be substantially less. And I think that's what you have found out, Canute. But again, just as a point of reference in here, but expect we could get the point of sale system for whatever it is, used tank or new tank. And we know we've got to replace our current system. The shipping, actually the shipping here comes from a quote that he recently got, $5,000. That's just shipping the tank down here from Oregon. Engineering estimate, $5,000. Concrete work, also about $5,000. And he says that was also based on a recent quotes he did for somebody else. Crane services, said that's probably a little bit on the high side. But that's just to have a crane come in and lift it off the truck and put it on the concrete slab. Electrical, I'm guessing, is about $1,000, depending on where we were located. I'm not trying to address anything here where we would locate it, because that'll influence the numbers. So you can see the total, the estimate for the system, which happens to be new. We get a used one, that drops down. Then, regardless of what we get new or used, we've got to remove the underground tank system. I took numbers from the consultant studies. These are numbers before they inflated it with their 40% increases or so. And you can see to remove the existing tank, to backfill, compact, other removals, which is that's the pipes. So, and restore the asphalt around, I guess, where the areas they take off, and a temporary fuel truck to handle it while we're switching out systems. And then I just threw in unknowns for $20,000, about $106,000. And for that total system with the new tank, about $301,000. Again, I don't have a high confidence in this, but it's not $700,000. And just as a reference to say, if we did the system, if you take the tank out of this, it's about what we call $145,000 to remove the tank and put concrete in for a new tank. And of course, if we get a used system that meets our requirements, it gets less than that $300,000. So as a snapshot, that's from a cost perspective, that's where it is. Where the tank will go, and the recommendation to say for do that, it still needs to be worked. I've got dimensions for this size tank and how far the ballards need to be and how big the concrete pad needs to be. And, from the consultant reports as verified by Mascot Engineering for the setbacks, which we may be able to negotiate some of that with the fire department. But all the setbacks seem to be consistent between what Mascot is saying. In fact, he sent me some material on that and what the consultants are quoting us. So I still need to run that. We locate it near our existing recommendation for the consultants. Depending on we go and configure that, of course, is going to change the cost.
Well, thank you for breaking this down, because I think we've heard numbers anywhere from 70,000 to 700,000 for a new fuel system, right? And I think if you break it down on the smaller items, they can start make more sense on where the numbers are coming from. I know the tank has been anywhere from $0 to 250,000, right? So there's a wide range of areas, and then the size of the tank plays into it. And what does the price include? Does it include the dispensers too, and the canopy, and the reclaiming system and things like that? So
there's a number of other things, but I know with this particular tank, to quote, what's interesting, it doesn't have a pump to transfer fuel from the transit trucks to the tank. So if he says a typical thing on these type of things is that the truck pumps it into the tank. Because to add that to the system, that's a $12,000 for example option, which he doesn't really recommend. But when we evaluate the different tanks, new or used, you need to go apples and apples comparison. I did say the 12,000 gallon tank is the most common one because you get to take advantage of the price breaks for 8,000 gallon deliveries.
Yeah.
So this is the beginning, but the good news is it's not 500,000 or it's not 700,000. I think, if we look at, if this really holds, I had assumed that for a loan amount of 350,000. It's a cost of a large diesel pusher motorhome.
Terry, has anybody contacted Hunt Brothers, who gave us the very first estimate and had the used tank available?
I talked to them initially, and they're now not returning my calls. I don't know if the person's just not there anymore, or they sold the tank. But I've tried since I had the initial discussion, which went well, because that's what he said. He had 75. It was a rough number, 75,000 for a 12,000 gallon tank. After that initial call, I've heard nothing from him.
Yeah, it was a 10,000 gallon. I have the guy's phone number, and
what I have my notes was a 12,000 gallon tank.
No,
That's from a different place, Terry. That's from isn't that from the?
That's the used one in.
That's from Minden, right?
Right.
The one Phil is
Yeah.
talking one is from Oakland, I guess. He mentioned it last time, the Hunter one.
the Port of Oakland had a tank that they didn't need and they wanted rid of, and they were willing to give it to us at a very, very low price, maybe nothing.
Hmm.
And Hunt Brothers came out here and met with us, and I think Canood was there. And they said somewhere around $100,000 for the tank, and installed after the tank had been reworked by the original manufacturer, Convault. That's I think they're down somewhere between the Bay Area and here. They are probably one of the largest tank manufacturers here on the West Coast. So I will, if you want me to, I will contact or make an effort to contact that same vendor and see if that tank is still available. And I don't know why we go after it in the first place.
If you could do that and then get whatever information about the tank, does it meet the UL 280?
Yes.
The fire code requirements are.
Yes, it does.
And the materials and any information you get about the spec for the tanks. And particularly the usable fuel, because what I've learned from several sources is 10,000 gallons is not popular because it makes it difficult to take advantage of 8,000 gallon deliveries.
Right. And if you have to cut your delivery back to 7,500, that may be what you have to do. But the thing is, if you can save $150,000 on the tank,
I agree. Yeah.
you can pay a lot of delivery fees.
If you can get whatever information you can on the tank would be appreciated.
Yeah, it's a 10,000 gallon tank. It's under the UL certification, and that included sending it back to the original manufacturer, Convault, and have them go through the tank and put a seal inside the tank, make sure the tank was all fresh and sealed and perfect and just like brand new.
Right.
So I will.
Because information, you could look for epoxy coated tanks as opposed to just going to bare steel.
That would be epoxy coating the inside of this tank.
That's apparently very, very important. That's good.
So.
Yeah, any information like that allows us to make the apples.
Right. And we've had that. I got that about a little bit over a year ago, I think. And then it was just kind of cast aside because it wasn't new, but I'll look back into it.
Okay, that would be great. Yeah. I've also, any other contacts for used tanks, because I've been searching and it's not like you can Google and get a whole page of used fuel tanks.
I have a contact with AOPA, and for airports that are closing, there are tanks available because you can't sell them because they have lead in them. You can't sell them to an automotive guy unless you have the tank rebuilt. So there are airports that are closing. And if we can take and get a tank from like Santa Monica is going to be closing in the near future, 1 or 2 years. If we can pick up one of those tanks, it's definitely a benefit to us. The other thing with Hunt Brothers is they had someone willing to take our old tank for free. In other words, they were going to take the tank. We had to pay to take the tank out of the ground, but we set it on the back of a semi truck at no cost besides the setting it on the truck, and they take it away. And so that would save us $10,000 or $15,000 in the process, because when it becomes a hazardous material, then it has to be hauled off and disposed of as hazardous material.
Yeah, if you find the information about that'd be great.
I have the guy's phone number, I think.
Okay. Yeah, and then any other thumbs you come up with to say, I've got to get back engaged on this, pulling this together. But one of the things I want to do on here is it 700,000, which is obviously very bad and not doable, or is it 300,000. It's closer to 300,000.
Right. And every 100 or 200,000 we save is definitely a feather in our cap.
Well, you can see from if these numbers are reasonably right, if we go, just assume that taking out the tank, it's 145,000.
I just don't know how we solve these conflicts, because Phil, you say this, but then when we talk to the county and Epic, they strongly recommend against these tanks, right? The county, of course, has to approve whatever we put in here. And the other one is that they say whatever tank we pull out that size of 20,000 gallon has to be cut up and carried away from here. But if you can get something concrete, we keep hearing these, maybe, right, that it's going to be free and all that, but can we trust that in the end when we based our whole future on it? I guess.
Right.
Well, Knut, you were in the meeting with the man.
I was, but that didn't change the fact what the county said and Epic said and so forth. Right? I can go back and get the comments from them and why they say so.
That's all that this part of Hunt Brothers deals with is underground fuel tanks and above ground fuel tanks.
Right.
Well, I particularly bought about $5 million of tanks from them, California. So I have a lot of faith in what they tell me.
Okay.
And they put in a large 42,000 gallon fuel farm for me down in Stockton, a state-of-the-art system using these same tanks. So I have to believe that, and it was a state-run facility, that I have to believe these folks are credible.
You will guarantee that for $0 we can get rid of our underground tank, I guess.
I can't guarantee anything a year and a half after the proposal was made.
Right.
I'm very disappointed that we didn't take and make an effort when the proposal was made and the offer was made, that we didn't move forward with it. I think that was very foolish. But again, that's going backwards. I think we should go forward and see if the thing is still available. And if it is, we can't take and sit around and wait 6 months or a year to see if they're going to hang on to it for us because we're nice guys.
Well, and also that the whole thing ties into the ability to get additional funds to pay for this.
Right. Well, I think that they offered actually financing at that meeting.
Well, yeah, no, I understand it. Yeah, that works, but we show from our models is we can't, today we couldn't do financing. We need to get additional funds from someplace.
I think that you'll find, and this is one of the things that they brought up, that you'll find that the reduced cost of licensing and insurance will almost cover the cost of the tank, as you prorate it out, because the cost of the tank is so much reduced for insurance and for licensing and for maintenance that I'd say it's probably 35% of what we're paying now.
I would agree with that this estimate here, we need to include what are the fees now and going to be in the future, because they are going down dramatically for above ground storage tanks.
Yeah. So I think that would be a good component to put in your calculations.
I don't know if you can see it here, but just as a reference, can you see the tanks on this, the picture?
Yeah.
Yeah, the one on this is Lincoln Airport, the one on the.
Oh, no, all I see is your fuel system replacement estimates.
Oh, okay. Well, I got to stop sharing and reshare. I just see if I can do this quickly here. I don't know if you can see that.
Yeah.
Okay, so the tank on the right is at Lincoln Airport. It's a mascot tank. That's how I found out about them. The other one's a Jet A tank. These are some of their stuff. I just showed. This is kind of an interesting side mounted. These are all in California from the descriptions. Different ways. We wouldn't do that, so ignore that. But
they're very much like what's down at not Mather, but McClellan Air Force Base down there, or the ex-McClellan Air Force Base, what their fuel system is down there. And they have one large tank that they're pumping 100 low lead out of. And I think it's probably about the same size.
Yeah, that's a 12,000 gallon tank at Lincoln.
Yeah. The Convault tanks are more of a square tank. And it's a tank like that, that's a double wall tank. And then they're encapsulated in concrete. So you reduce the cost of installation by having secondary containment basins. The only time that you have to worry about secondary containment is for the piping between the tank and the dispenser. So that is, by using what you just showed, is a mitigating factor in lowering costs.
And those tanks at Lincoln, one is the concrete
Oh, that's Convol?
tank, so you don't need a containment system. But,
Yeah,
yeah,
Well-
that's, that's Mascot buys these tanks. But it's
Yeah.
a concrete, and that meets the code requirements to put the dispenser right next to it and not have a containment system.
yeah, that's really what you want. You have to have a small containment system
Yeah.
between the tank and the dispenser. So in case you get a leak, that's contained.
Yeah, they do that. That's the tray in
Yeah.
there. What I'd like
Yeah.
to do is just kind of give a snapshot as we gather more information. We'll talk about it other, I think, subject to your approval, at other finance meetings, as well as the public meeting they want to set up to give the rest of the community an idea of what's going on and what the
I
plan would
agree.
be.
Let's pursue these options. Yeah, absolutely. And
Yeah, the Hunt Brothers is a fairly large corporation, and they deal with this all over Western United States. So
And I was referring to Hut Aviation in Minden Airport, not who that's where I got the one to quote from.
yeah. Okay, well, I'll see what I can do. I think I still have some of the information, and we can move forward from there.
thank you.
Thanks, Bill.
Sure.
So Terry, I think for the board meeting on Monday, we should present some of the options we are pursuing, and I like the breakdown, and I think we should include the change in fees and inspections required once we switch, because that's going to be a big saving as well. So, all right. That's last agenda item is the flight school Foothill Flight Center. Unless there was more on the fuel system.
That's it.
So let me try and share that. So let me try. Sorry, I gotta share this too. Just a second. Here we go. I hope this is, let me try and zoom in a little bit. So the board and the manager received a proposal from the flight school Foothill Flight Center that about renewing their lease for the big hangar. And as they put in the letter, that the airport's success is very closely tied to their success, and they would like to contribute to what the airport is. So they have proposed a renewed lease for the big hangar, as can be seen here. Given that I also work for the Foothill Flight Center, I may have to recuse myself on any vote that the board has to do. So I just want to make that clear. But so what they're proposing is a release that starts 2022 with a 22% increase the first year, 28% increase the second year, and then the third year. The current lease runs through 2023, if I believe, and it was set up originally, I believe, 5 years ago. And I guess times weren't as good as then. So that was a lease that was created between the airport manager and the flight school. I don't think there was, if I understand it correctly, any board involvement in that lease. So they proposed this lease going forward. So I think for us, if I do a quick analysis, currently, if it stays at the $900 a month for that big hangar, we bring in about $10,800 a year. And over 10 years, that would be $108,000. So it's a $70,000 additional income for the airport by accepting this lease agreement from Foothill Flight Center. So any comments or feedback or suggesting what we do?
So from what, here's my thoughts. First, I just want to remark is that this is, I don't know how to explain it, but this is great that what the Foothills is proposing for this now, to help out the viability of the airport, but of course, which helps their viability too, to keep the airport around. And they have been very generous in the past on helping us with them things. And currently we're looking at, the upgrades in the internet and be able to do some things which they're going to pay for, it's been fantastic. This, I think, is this is a very interesting offer and very good. But what I'd like to do, or my recommendations are, is we need to consider this. We need to do our due diligence on this in the context of the other hangars as well. A while back, when Kevin was here before COVID, the county was going to do kind of a competitive, for lack of a better word, competitive assessment or a survey on hangars and tie downs, through the area that was going to be supplied for the El Dorado County airports, and then we would get the benefit of that. COVID put that on hold, and as far as we know today, that hasn't happened. But the idea, as I recall, at that time, we would take a look at what the rates are and potentially make adjustments to the hangar rates. What I would like to do is to at least to kind of do our own kind of survey of what the hangar rents are. In the context is, let's look at all the other hangars too, to kind of be able to treat everybody fairly. Maybe we raise the rents on the other hangars or put inclusions to raise it because inflation. I don't know. So there's two parts. There's the rent rate itself, and then what the contract says. I'll admit, I do not know what these leases say in them. I have not seen one. From I generally understand, Kevin did a lot of stuff on it, but there's still some heritage stuff in there which may or may not be good. To do this, what I would propose, I've asked is and Jeff can't respond on this, but since he's got kind of a contractual background and knows these things, and he's kind of doesn't have an airplane now, but has lots of experience with airplane and hangars, he takes a fresh look at what the leases for the hangars are. So my thought, and see what the rest of the committee says, that we approach this from the standpoint of the rest of the hangars, and consider that when we consider what Foothills is offering, which again, I really appreciate, because this is the type of help that we need. But I'm a little, what I don't kind of want to avoid is reacting to this one and then separately addressing the other hangars without understanding. I feel like we need to do the due diligence, what's kind of going on in the big picture.
Don, are you trying to make some comments? I could see you.
Oh, okay. He's got a hand there.
No, I'm in full agreement. I did call several contacts that I have in Placerville, Georgetown, and Lincoln, and it's all over the board. So it'd be interesting to see if someone could really, narrow that down. And we just signed a lease for our office. We just did a long-term lease for our office. So what we're trying to do, our goal is to get, the next 5 or 10 years budgeted, because, as we just recently bought new aircraft, but we're quickly running through those aircraft. So we're trying to figure out, okay, what are our next steps? And being able to budget and being able to plan on a number that's fair for both sides will allow us to continue to this growth model that we're in. But I don't have a lot to add on what is happening. In fact, I talked to Mark Pilkington at length about it, and he alluded to some sort of a lawsuit that was going on potentially in Placerville because of a fee structure and certain people not being charged, certain people being charged, and he didn't give me a lot of detail. And it wasn't the information I was trying to get. What I was trying to get was what's it cost to rent a hangar, and he didn't really have that information. So I don't know how far. It would be good to see if you guys can get some of that information. But so yeah, that's our current goal is being able to plan for the future.
No, understand, and Johnny, bring up a good point. As you plan your aircraft needs or so, is getting that stability and knowing what
we're putting 80 hours a month on each of those airplanes currently, so it's
that's a lot. That's a lot. So
I
that's,
guess, go ahead.
I say that, so that's, that's kind of my thoughts to do this in the context of the other ones.
Mhm.
I mean, that's would be my recommendation for the board at the meeting, and then address it in January, being that we don't have a December meeting. And I think that time we'll have some additional information. My gut feel says you should do due diligence and kind of the big picture.
Right. But then, no, I agree that we should do the due diligence, but also it's a nice offer for the airport to renew the lease contract, and whether we can do that or not. So again, I
It
don't.
very much is. I'd like
vote
Yeah,
in board meeting, so.
I would add this, if let's say that you guys do the due diligence and you come back and you like this offer, but it takes you to February. I'm still willing to go backwards in January, February, and start this in 2022. I think again, our goal here is to get something tied down long term, and this was a starting point, because I think when we did initially sign this lease, like you said, aviation wasn't as popular, but I do recognize right now that aviation is very popular, but we don't know what aviation is going to be like in 2026, 2027.
Right.
So, and this allows us to plan if we can budget and plan out 10 years.
And we, as I understand, the airport has gone through times where hangars were available as things slowed down.
Yeah. In my short tenure in aviation, I've seen that. So.
Yeah, Don, I appreciate that. That's
Yeah.
that's my kind of the thought, is we could take the disposition, try to get in the January timeframe to complete this, worst case February.
Okay.
Okay. Well, I guess I'd like to second Terry's comment about, so the flight school has been very generous to the airport with both computer equipment, and we are negotiating, talking about the internet connections and broadband as well right now. So thank you for all that. All
Yes,
right.
thank you, Don.
You're very welcome.
So I think we are sorry it's turned out to be a long meeting, but go back to the agenda here. So Terry, for Monday, you're going to present the proposal from the flight school, right? And then
That's correct. I'll present it.
the board decide what the next step should be for that one. So.
Right. That's correct.
Yeah, and just sorry, one last thing. If you're trying to make a decision, I understand the part about looking at all the hangars, and I'm not familiar with many of the other hangars. We were in the one small hangar for a short period of time, but you could separate it if you wanted to make a decision on this from the fact that we are a commercial operation where I don't think, short of Dustin, anyone else is. I don't think anybody else does anything commercially.
There
right?
isn't anyone else who's operating as a commercially out of their hangar. So I think that's a good point, is looking at it as a separation. It's a business versus just regular hangars.
Yeah.
No, I agree, Don. That was kind of my thinking too. Yeah, I just feel I need to kind of take a look at the whole big system, and then we can separate it out.
No, from listening to what you guys were looking at earlier, you've got lots of stuff that you really need to ponder. So
but I point out it's all fun stuff, because flying is cool.
That is true. That is true. So and we're open to additional conversations. So
Appreciate that. Yes, thanks, Don.
Yeah, and then and just to point out, we didn't mention it here, but in the email that I did send to Dominic and you guys is, and I don't think this is the best thing for the airport, but if the airport needed a influx of capital, Foothill would be interested in purchasing that hangar. Again, if I was in your shoes, I don't think that's the right thing from a revenue stream, but if you got into a situation, we would certainly consider buying that hangar.
I think the airport has bad experience selling land too. Wish we had.
Well, that was my I as I taxi by, I get to see all the RVs.
Yeah, exactly. That's all.
So that was my point. But I don't think it's the right thing.
Anyway.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Don, and Thank you for the proposal. And with that, I want to ask, is there any last comment from anyone?
This is Phil. I was able to acquire the information for the Hunt Brothers representatives, so I'll call them in the morning.
Okay, thank you.
Excellent.
So with that, we're going to adjourn here. Sorry for the long meeting, 6 p.m., but I felt it was very productive. Thanks to the input from everyone. And I hope to see you all at the board meeting Monday night. And so, thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
It's been fun.